Hey, now it's the Rob from 106.1 KISS FM here with my 16-bit colleague.
Hey guys, it's me, Steve, web contributor to 1061 evansville.com. And if you ask us to go camping, you have to bring the tit. We'll bring the banjo and kazooie.
That's right. We will bring the banjo and the kazooie. Today's show going to be a lot of fun. This is actually one I've been looking forward to for a long time. By the way, once again, we are the best dressed podcast on the internet, for sure.
Thank you for the shirt.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's talk about the Super Nintendo and what we feel are the three best games on that system. I feel like the Super Nintendo is probably my favorite gaming system of all time. The system came out in the early 90s when I was really becoming, not really a man, but a boy. Yep. And let's see, I associate the system with being like my third grade through like, seventh grade, until the next generation of consoles kind of paved the way and or did away with the old and in with the new. And those are my game playing years at its best, I feel like.
Yeah.
So the Super Nintendo has a very near and dear spot in my heart. I always felt it was the winner of the console wars, the 16-bit generation.
Yes.
And the Super Nintendo holds my favorite library of video games. It was very difficult for me to narrow things down to just three. In fact, I have honorable mentions, which I won't do full inductions for, but I want to mention the game Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy IV, which was released on Super Nintendo as Final Fantasy II, and also, I cannot believe it did not make my top three, but it did not. Donkey Kong Country did not make my top three.
No.
So, Steve, do you want to kick things off?
We'll kick things off. When we came up with this and we knew we were doing Super Nintendo, I was thinking, oh, I love this game on Super Nintendo. It's not an exclusive. When I think of this game, it's not an exclusive. All the games I loved were not exclusive. Mm-hmm. So, to cut through all that, my number three game may not be a popular choice, but it's my choice.
That makes it great because just our favorites.
Yes.
That's all we want to know is what are your favorites. Like Star Tropics for Nintendo was no one's number one favorite game except for mine.
Yes.
I think it makes it a good induction. So go ahead. The more out there, the better.
Okay. My number three is Bomberman.
Oh my goodness, great game.
Yes.
A multiplayer mainstay, a game that still exists in different incarnations today. Yeah, sure.
I love, the simplicity of it. My favorite thing was battling a friend on those simple stages. Back then you didn't know that it was a simple stage, but
right.
By now. But my only complaint is I wish I could have played with three other friends opposed to one and computer players.
Sure.
But Bomberman, it holds a special place in my heart, and just blowing up that simple screen, I will remember it until the day I'm gone.
My friends and I used to play Bomberman it was on the Sega Channel, so maybe it was a different version of the game or whatever, but man, we used to stay up all night playing that game, walking into your own bombs. If that doesn't make you want to throw the Genesis or the Super Nintendo out the window, I don't know what does. Like I said, it was tough for me to narrow down the games I wanted. For me, I could not believe that when I sat down and thought about it, Donkey Kong Country didn't make my top three, but it did not. I'm going to say my third favorite Super Nintendo game is actually my all-time favorite Super Mario Brothers game. Super Mario World, the pack-in, 1991, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 1990.
1990.
In my opinion, the greatest Super Mario game of all time. This is the one where it introduces Yoshi.
Yes.
You've got the cape. The sound effects are my favorite of all time in that game. The enemies, the colors are so bright. The level design, that overworld map. This was by far the best Super Mario game of all time. And one thing I love is so last week Super Mario Maker came out for the Wii U.
Yes.
And designing levels with that color palette, with the Super Mario World palette, and playing other people's levels is still so much fun. It's a game that we pop in all the time. Everyone's played Super Mario World, and I'm giving that the bronze medal. It was hard ranking at. I didn't know if I wanted it number 2 or number 1, but I actually stuck it at number 3.
Yeah, actually, your number 3 is my number 2.
Okay.
I think it's kind of where Mario kind of turned the page, and it was really, if that game wasn't so good, I don't know that there'd be Mario Kart or Mario, Super Mario,
right.
Anything past that. And that just kind of said, this is Mario, we're here to stay. And again, it introduced Yoshi. So, that's my number 2.
Yeah, to me, it's like this is, Mario is the definitive franchise in video games, and this is the definitive game of that franchise. So to me, such an important game. My second favorite game on the Super Nintendo is Super Metroid.
Okay.
I don't know if you played that game, but this game took an already great game in Metroid. And for me to get into a sci-fi alien environment game is crazy because I hate science fiction. I don't like it at all. But this game makes you feel completely isolated, and yet you're having a great time the entire time. It gave you save stations, which the older game did not have. It had a very complicated password system. It gave you graphics. You could see what was going on. It gave you different ways to shoot different weapons. Really fun boss fights. Like, I usually don't like boss fights because they're too hard. This game's boss fights, right on the money. I loved my time playing Super Metroid, and I always go back and revisit that game, including just a few weeks ago. I played that game. I love it. If you've never played it, download it on the Virtual Console. Get yourself a copy of Super Metroid. I adore it.
All right.
And Steve, what is the best Super Nintendo game of all time?
This is one game I still actually have.
Okay.
It's probably not very popular, but it is my number one. It's Super Play Action Football.
Okay.
It's not endorsed.
May I?
Yes, please.
Never played this one.
It's not endorsed by the NFL. I mean, you can be any of the 28 NFL teams. You can be over 90 college teams.
Really?
But what I love about this game is you can be a high school football team, and you can be any color you want to be. What I loved about this game is I could make my little brother be all pink, and I could whoop his butt.
Could you give him a name?
I don't know that you... Oh, yeah, you could give them... it was like a high school name.
Okay.
Now that you mention that, I don't remember any of the names, but I just remember making him all pink. He was 9 years younger than me.
That's what you get, little brother.
Yes. If you want to play with me, you're pink.
You pink little pansy.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, listen, by the way, I'm happy to be the pink player anytime for you, Steve.
Thank you.
My favorite game on the Super Nintendo, my favorite game of the 16-bit generation, and my favorite game of all time, A Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past.
Wow.
And this game, to me, is exactly what a game should be. This utilized the color palette and the new colors, the new graphic system. It kept the gameplay, what everyone liked about the first Zelda game, made it so much bigger, a story easier to understand, a little bit more direction that kept people really, really close to that character. And if you want to talk about games like this, we talk about the Mario game, how that kind of solidified Mario and kept him as a mainstay. Zelda, Link, still as relevant today as they were in the early 90s. I love everything about this game. I have played it so many times, still no stranger to picking it up and just throwing it in for a little bit because it is awesome. My favorite game of all time is Super Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. So there you have it. And another one, we really have one crossover. So 5 games that we feel are the best on the Super Nintendo and of the 16-bit generation. But next week, Steve, we will jump into the 32-bit generation of video games. We move into discs also. Oh, right. Because we have not reviewed any games on a disc, at least in this little episodic thing we've been doing here. Yes. The PlayStation jumped onto the scene a few years later, and we will talk all about what we feel are the definitive PlayStation games. This is PlayStation 1, obviously, so stick around next week. We'll be back with another edition of the 16-Bit Superstars. So for myself, the Rob, and for Steve...
Thanks, guys.